Beowulf is a 2007 film directed by Robert Zemeckis. In Denmark, 507 AD, King Hrothgar and his people are menaced by a monster called Grendel. After a costly and humiliating defeat, Hrothgar seeks warriors to kill Grendel and save his kingdom. Beowulf and his men arrive, and after a bloody battle, defeat Grendel. It is revealed that Grendel is actually the son of Hrothgar. Grendel's mother, in her grief, assaults Beowulf's men. Beowulf sets off to kill Grendel's mother, but she seduces him both with her body and her promise of power. Many years pass, and the offspring of Grendel's mother and Beowulf emerges, taking the form of a dragon. Beowulf conquers the dragon, but dies in the aftermath. He leaves the kingdom to his compatriot, Wiglaf, who sees Grendel's mother in the ocean, beckoning him to a fate much like Beowulf. The film ends ambiguously, but implies that Wiglaf may become another victim of Grendel's mother. The epic poem upon which the film is based is technically unnamed and by an unknown author. We only give it the name Beowulf after the protagonist. It is the oldest surviving long poem in Old English, giving it great historical importance. It has been translated and retranslated over the centuries. Copies have been destroyed, others finished posthumously. J.R.R. Tolkien's translation was finished without him many years after the famous fantasy author's death. I feel that I can say, as a former literature teacher, that Beowulf's significance in the literary world has more to do with its unique place in history and less to do with it being a complex, compelling tale. The written version, not the film, is even more straightforward with precious little characterization. It's a good story, don't get your English degrees in a twist about it. This is not an opinion that stories and films of the past century or so have eclipsed this ancient narrative, though. Greek tragedies that predate Beowulf hold greater substance, and Elizabethan and Jacobean era playwrights reach far greater heights. And I know some would argue against all this, and that's perfectly fine. But Beowulf is historically important, but not narratively incredible. And with this in mind, writers, and especially screenwriters, have tried to take this well-known story and give it greater depth. Zemeckis' Beowulf, from a screenplay by Neil Gaiman and Roger Avery, makes several references to the epic poem, not only in the sense that it's an adaptation, of course, but in other ways. For one, Grendel speaks in a language that may not be instantly recognizable to the audience, but he is actually speaking in Old English, the language of the oldest known written version of the story, though the story takes place in Scandinavia. Anyway, Grendel speaks in Old English as a reference to the epic poem version. Also, Grendel's mother calls Beowulf the Bee-Wolf. In Old English, there were often compound words called kennings. A popular theory is that Beowulf's name is a kenning of bee and wolf, two dangerous creatures. In the poem, Grendel's mother does not say this.
His name will live forever.
Characters in the film often tell Beowulf that his name will live on forever in song, a reference to the epic poem surviving to this day. The poem references Christianity in several ways. Firstly, it explicitly states that Grendel is a descendant of Cain, a figure from the book of Genesis. In Christianity, Cain committed the first murder and was cursed by God for this. What constitutes the mark of Cain is open to interpretation depending upon one's faith. At any rate, this reference is not the only way in which the story is given Christian flavor. Characters in the epic poem refer to God, singular. See, the poem, as we know it anyway, was written somewhere between the 8th and 11th century, but it takes place in the Scandinavian countries of what we would now call Denmark and Sweden, somewhere in the 5th or 6th century. Yet the characters speak in Christian terms. The Christianization of Scandinavia didn't happen until later. It's way more complicated than that, but the point is that Zemeckis' film takes this aspect of the poem, anachronistic Christianization, and expands upon it by actually showing the characters slowly introducing Christianity into their kingdom. In the film, Unferth is given a new dimension as he is a proponent of praying to Jesus Christ in hopes of keeping Grendel at bay. Hrothgar dismisses this, perhaps clinging to the old ways, but also because he does not believe it will do any good. If the film or even the poem had been historically accurate, nobody would be talking about Christianity with such reverence. Indigenous traditions were firmly entrenched in the culture at that time. Keep in mind, I'm simplifying centuries of history, religion, and literature, but, summing up. Anyway, in the film, there are mentions of Odin, a powerful deity in the Norse pantheon, but as the film goes on, Christianity becomes more and more common until the flash forward when it is the standard, even official tradition of Beowulf's kingdom. When Unferth is attacked by the dragon, he accuses Beowulf of being responsible. He does not explicitly say that he knows that the dragon is the son of Beowulf and Grendel's mother, but he exclaims that this is all due to the sins of the father. This is a common thread in the Bible, that being how a father's behavior affects his children. It appears in over a dozen books of the Bible in various ways. The iniquity of the father. In saying this, Unferth judges Beowulf in Christian terms.
Sins of the fathers! Sins of the fathers!
The monsters that Beowulf faces in the film are ancient, pre-Christian beasts. In the film, Grendel is not related to the biblical Cain, as far as we know, but of Hrothgar. Grendel's mother is even more mysterious. These are monsters of the old world. When the dragon, another beast of ancient magic, attacks Beowulf's kingdom, he burns the cross, symbolically rebelling against the new world. This transition is marked in Beowulf himself. He grows older and laments what he once lost. His youth is the old ways. His maturity is the new way. His foes are no longer evil monsters, but men. Beowulf, a name etched in time, is also representative of the passage of time on Earth. He changes as his kingdom changes. In the poem, Beowulf credits God for his heroic deeds, but the film takes a comparatively critical approach to the introduction of new religion into a culture with its own ancient traditions. Beowulf laments that the Christian God has killed all the monsters, and all the heroes too. He says all that's left are martyrs and shame.
You are the monster slayer. We men are the monsters now.
Shame of sinfulness is obviously part of the very DNA of Christianity. Beowulf's downfall, his first sin that we see, much as it is written in the Bible, is that of temptation. Beowulf, as put together by Zemeckis, Gaiman, and Avery, is surprisingly thoughtful for a film that also has the titular character burst through a sea monster's eye, screaming his own name. Ugh. But all the bravado and naked fighting aside, this is put together well. Its religious imagery woven into the narrative rather than laid on too thick. Beowulf can't be adapted properly into a film that remains faithful to the epic poem simply because of the structure of it. Some liberties with the source material had to be taken. Literature teachers can't show this to their students in place of reading the book, not unless they want their students to fail the test. Purists might scoff at this version, but the fact that it deviates so far actually benefits the epic poem, because something so distant can't replace the original. Thanks for watching the latest episode of Renegade Cut, everyone. If you want to support the show, you can click the orange link to my Patreon. That's how all of this happens. If you want to subscribe and never miss an episode, click on the red link. If you want to watch more, there are some recommended videos below. I'll see you next week for another episode.